Alrighty, so now we should be ready to look at the second refined entry model. But before we dig into that straight away, I think it's just good to briefly talk about LC-2A again, because this second entry model that you're about to see is almost the perfect sort of complementary addition to what we've already been doing with LC-2A. So this diagram is probably going to be the most useful for you to understand what I mean. So as we saw in one of the previous lessons, we are only looking at what is built in the pullback for when we are trading the LC-2A entry model, right? So in very, very simple terms, we only care about the strong liquidity that is built in the pullback to our POI. We look for that fake break liquidation, okay? And this is what we're looking at, what is built in the pullback. So this is why for all of LC-2A, anything that is built in that previous, like swing or internal leg on your medium time frame, anything that is in here, any highs or lows, right? Depending if you're long or short, we do not care about. We do not look at that. We do not consider it. It is not part of the LC-2A entry model. It must form in that pullback to the POI, and as that is an extremely strict rule. Okay. This entry model we're going to look at is where we can start to use the liquidity in here, okay? But there are very, very specific rules and scenarios in how we do this, so please pay attention carefully. Okay, so for those of you who have been in Photon from pretty much 2023 or before, you will be familiar with our entry model, liquidity entry model 1, right? Kind of the old way in which we called it. So I'm going to go through this nice and slowly so you can visualize what this is. So essentially, this would be when your medium time frame is bullish, right, by this red line. We then get another medium time frame, boss or IBOS to the upside, and that will give us our medium time frame POI, right, this red circle here, that we would then look to take longs from this medium time frame POI. Okay. Now, what liquidity entry model 1 allowed us to do was, if there was no strong liquidity built in our lower time frame pullback to our POI, right? So we don't get any fake break. No strong liquidity was built, right? No pullback inducement. That's what we call it, PBID. All that means is nothing was built in this pullback. Then how could we use strong liquidations in order to help us time an entry to trade this POI if no strong liquidity was built in this pullback? Well, this is what this entry model allowed us to do, and that was to look at strong liquidity in that leg to the left, right? In that medium time frame leg, if there was, say, like a strong low, or if we're getting short, a strong high in the leg to the left, then we could use that, okay? But it had to be on the medium time frame as well. So let's say the medium time frame is the M15 for you. You'd be looking at bullish M15 structure. Price would come into your M15 POI. You would look on your lower time frame and you would see, well, no strong liquidity has been built in the pullback. So, okay, what can I do? Well, this entry model would allow you to get involved only if there was strong liquidity on your medium time frame. Okay, so this low had to be visible again on your medium time frame. Once that low was liquidated and we got our POI mitigation, we would then identify the PBL, right, the point before the liquidation that took out that low, and we would need to wait for that PBL to fail and a bullish change of character. Why did we need to wait for that? We needed to wait for that because that would tell us that potentially institutions have used the available sell side liquidity below that medium time frame low, right? Because there's a strong medium time frame low here. It broke some structure. So we know there's going to be induced liquidity below that low. So we want to know, are the big guys using the sell side liquidity below this medium time frame low in order for them to get long, in conjunction with this POI area? Is there enough demand getting long here to signal that we want to get involved? Well, the way we would define that is look for the supply, the point before the liquidation, right, the PBL, that liquidated that medium time frame lid, wait for our mitigation, wait for the PBL fail and shock. Okay, at this point, then we've seen everything we need to see to convince us that the big guys have used the sell side liquidity below that medium time frame low in conjunction with the demand in this POI. We've seen that move to the upside. Now we've seen everything we need to see for LQEM1, and then we would hope that price would tag us, pull back and tag us in, right? And that's where we would get involved. So it was a really good entry model that gave us loads of confirmation. But as we know, the more confirmation you wait for, unfortunately, a lot more times you're not going to get tagged into the position, and it would just go without us, right? So again, exact same thing for the short, right? I won't go over it. So similarly to LC2A, as you've probably guessed, we are going to do the exact same thing, but instead of waiting for the PBO fail and shock, we are going to go and get in on that initial liquidation. Okay, so it's the same involvement as LC2A, where we're just going to get in a bit early. So if you already understand Essential Model, if you've been here, if you've been a member previously, it's all the same, just like LC2A, but we are getting in earlier, okay? The key difference here from LQEM1, which is crucial, is that we are now allowed to use lid on our lower time frame. Okay, so again, lid, if you're not sure, this is covered in the liquidity module in the course, but it's where we have a structural low, okay, with available liquidity behind it. So it just means that price has not traded past it since it was created. But we'll go over loads of examples on the chart so you know exactly what I mean. Okay, but for those of you who understand this one and you've already been trading that, before it had to be visible on your medium time frame. Okay, this structural low had to be visible in your medium time frame. For this new refinement, we are allowed to use lower time frame lid. Okay, now this is quite aggressive. So in the following lessons in this module, we are going to cover exactly when you should use this, because you need to be using it in very specific high probable scenarios. Otherwise, you're just going to have trades all the time and they're going to be low probability. Okay, but we'll get into that in a bit more depth. So in terms of how the entry model works, again, M15, or let's say your medium time frame to be more accurate, will be bullish, right? So this red line will be a medium time frame swing break of structure or a medium time frame internal break of structure, right? Because we want to then be looking at our medium time frame POI. When we get our mitigation, and then we're looking to see, okay, on our lower time frame, we look, has there been a strong liquidation in the pullback? And that is where we'll be looking for LC2A. We want to see, was there a fake break to the upside? Okay, that's the first thing we want to look for. Always look for LC2A first. Well, if we look here, we can see that all of the pullback highs and lows just remain bearish, right? None of these highs get broken, right? So there's no fake break. There is no strong liquidity built in the pullback. There's no pullback inducement, whatever name you want to give it. In simple terms, there is no fake break in the pullback. There's no strong liquidation, or there isn't currently a strong liquidation available that we can use. So if there isn't one here, we've got two options now. We either wait for one to be built in the pullback, right? We wait for that fake break and then we look for the LC2A here, right? We wait for that. Or you can use this entry model, which is where we look to the left and we look to see, is there available lid? Okay, so basically, is there a structural low, available in front of or within our POI that gives us a strong liquidity point? Okay, if we can see that, once that low, that structural low there, which can be visible in your lower time frame, once that gets liquidated, if it's within our POI, right, we can then enter on that liquidation. Okay, or it can be before it can be within it, as long as the PBO is still active. Then that can be our entry to get involved. Rather than waiting for the PBO fail shock and then hoping price pulls us back, we are getting in on the liquidation of that lid in or within our POI. Okay, remember, we always must have the POI mitigation. Okay, and then we're just combining it with a liquidation of a structural low to the left, or the opposite for supply, right? We have bearish medium time frame structure causing a bearish medium time frame boss or IBOS. This creates our medium time frame POI. Okay. We get our POI mitigation. That's step one. Then we look to see, has there been a strong liquidation in the pullback? Well, no, because none of these highs in the pullback, none of them broke a low, right? There's been no fake break liquidation in the pullback. There's no LC2A. So if we want to get involved, and if you want to use this entry model, you don't have to, but if you want to, this gives us another option where we can look left and go, was there a strong lower time frame high here, right? Did it break some structure? Okay. If it did, then we can draw that line across. And then if that liquidation lines up with our POI mitigation, now we can look to get involved. Okay. But again, this is a very, very aggressive entry model. So you have to learn when to use this in specific scenarios. Okay. And all the same rules apply. Nothing else the strategy changes. The most important thing is building your medium time frame narrative, understanding your POI selection, especially with this entry model. Okay. Because when you drop down to your medium time frame and you look left, in almost every, not every, but almost every, you're going to see lower time frame lid. There's always going to be like a little lower time frame low here, okay? And just to make it clear, in case some of you are finding it a little bit harder to visualize, right? Imagine, I'm just going to make this line thicker so you can see what I mean, that this black line here, this thick line, this is your medium time frame, okay? So you'll get like your medium time frame boss or IBOS. Let me use a thick black line, okay, here, and that gives us our medium time frame POI. Now, when you get your medium time frame POI mitigation, right, your alert goes off and you drop down to your lower time frame is going to be this thin gray line, right? When you look left, even though it might just be one big leg up on your medium time frame, when you look within that, you might see like a little, M5 or M1 pullback or whatever your lower time frame is, and you'll see that lower time frame low. That is then when you can draw a line across your liquidation point, okay? And then if price comes in, the PBO is still active, this is where we can look to enter, okay? So yeah, that's basically it. If you already know the old entry model, then hopefully this should make a lot of sense to you. But the key difference is we are allowed to use lower time frame lid. Once that gets liquidated in or before our POI, if it all lines up just the same way with LC2A, all the same rules apply in that regard, then we get involved. Okay, so the only difference between this LC1 and the difference between LC2A is just where the liquidation point is. Okay, for LC2A, we're simply looking for that strong liquidation to occur here, right, where we get like the fake break, and then this gives us our strong liquidity point here, and we just look for that to get liquidated. All the same rules apply, except rather than it occurring here in the pullback, we are looking for a strong low here to get liquidated, right? It's a strong low because it broke structure, therefore there's strong liquidity behind it. So if it lines up with a POI, we can hit it. And likewise for the short, there's a strong high here, right? On the lower time frame, it broke a low. So then when price comes back up, when that first initially gets liquidated, if it lines up, we can look to get involved. Okay? So in the following lessons, we're going to look at some real examples. I'll do my best to try and cover any potentially frequently asked questions that may come up. And then we'll also really need to pay attention to not just the entry model, but when we should use this, because we should be a lot more selective with this entry model because it's even more aggressive than LC2A. Okay. LC2A is going to be what you are thinking about 80, maybe even 90% of the time. This is like a bonus entry model that we'll use in very specific circumstances. Okay. LC2A is the main, bread and butter. That should be the majority of your trades. This is a nice little bonus addition. Okay. So without further ado, let's dive into the rest of the content.